Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. In the studio today, we're talking long distance with Praveen Shanbhag. Praveen is a second-generation Indian American with a very itinerant past. His current location is Palo Alto, California, where he recently finished his PhD at Stanford University. Of particular interest to our viewers, Praveen is also co-founder of Name Coach, which we'll learn about shortly. Praveen, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thank you, Alan. Very much appreciate being here, and excellent pronunciation of my name.
Thank you. Well, I work on that as we talked earlier. We have this mutual agreement that getting people's names right is a sign of respect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. So you grew up as a second-generation kid, born in Connecticut. But your parents had a very long journey. They've been in the country 3+ decades. But tell us a little bit about your parents' journey to the United States.
Sure. Yeah. So my dad came over to the U.S. To pursue his engineering degree at Purdue in the late '60s, and then in the late '70s, my mom and dad married, and my mom came over to the U.S. So started off in Connecticut, then moved to Cincinnati, Ohio when I was very young. Essentially, they've had a pretty amazing experience. At least that's the way they see it in the States. But I'm sure they face a lot of issues as immigrants, especially in the early days.
Sure. So, what is it like growing up as a second-generation kid? Because basically, your parents don't look and talk and dress like the other kids at school.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's interesting. I think growing up as a second-generation kid, it forces you to sort of walk this divide between, the culture of your parents or the culture your parents came from anyway,
yeah,
and the culture that you were born in, grew up in, and love. And so yeah, it was interesting because, there are little things like just value differences. I would see friends of mine and how their parents interacted with them. And it would be a little bit different from how my parents interacted. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but for me, it's obvious. I grew up this way. But for a lot of Indian Americans growing up in the U.S., their parents have a very heavy emphasis on academics. So I would get this a lot more so than my friends would, and it was a little puzzling to me. And other things as well, like small things, day-to-day life. I remember in high school there was a party I wanted to go to, and the big sticking point for being allowed to go was just the fact that there would be girls there, period. And I never heard of, any of my friends experience something like that. I think there were some sort of value differences that impacted the way I experienced childhood. On the other hand, I think having this connection to Indian culture was a fantastic thing growing up, even while I was identified as American.
Sure. You were talking earlier a little bit about stereotyping, and you had brought up the character from The Simpsons, Apu.
That's right. Yeah. So every now and then you're reminded by someone, or at least someone suggests in a way that you don't quite belong, right? That you're from somewhere else. So as a kid, kids are mean to each other a lot, and so that's fine. That happens. But the way in which some kids are mean to other kids changes depending on what group you belong to. So for me, every now and then someone would make a comment about Apu, the Quickie Mart owner from The Simpsons, and so that kind of thing. It sticks with you a little bit depending on how thick of skin you've developed. On the whole, I think most people weren't like that. Most kids weren't like that. I had great friends from all backgrounds growing up, and definitely felt that was just my community. But every now and then we get something like that.
Sure. We were also talking about the unfortunate set of circumstances surrounding, just after 9/11 in this country. because rightfully so, a lot of Americans were alarmed, and these culprits who were involved with this act or these acts in the Eastern Seaboard were not your typical white Americans. And you had brought up a story about afterwards an event on the bus. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so that was interesting. I think, as you pointed out, I think after 9/11, there was some backlash towards brown people in the country, and I'd heard about stories like this, and then I experienced it once. Shortly after 9/11, I was on a bus and I saw there was a Pakistani woman and her child on the bus as well, and there was a man kind of getting into some argument with them, and so I tried to intervene to see what was going on and see if it could help them. She seemed pretty distraught, and he kind of turned to me and said, go back to your home country, and use some pretty foul language about it, ethnic slurs. And he didn't get my ethnicity right, first of all, but more importantly, it was completely assumed that I was from somewhere else and someone I wasn't. And I think that was particularly frustrating to me because I've done various things with my career so far, but the summer before 9/11 happened, I was working in the White House and working on policy as a research intern there. And I remember, I had friends who were deeply affected by what happened in Washington D.C. And so it was just shocking to hear that sort of attitude towards me. Yeah. Sure.
I want to fast forward a number of years because your sister was at her college graduation and something unfortunate happened. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the inspiration for what my current project. My sister went to a small liberal arts college, and at her graduation, we had everybody there, family and family friends. Were all very excited. They'd flown, come from different places to see her graduate. And at the moment where her big moment when she's receiving her recognition, they completely mangled her name. So it was a little frustrating, probably more so for me and my family than for her. I think she was euphoric about graduating, and we all were. We didn't really let it ruin our moment, but nonetheless, it was it would have been nice if they could have given her done that for her, said her name properly at least at graduation.
So that started some gears turning in your head.
That's right. Yeah. So we're thinking about how I got to thinking about why this happened. I asked her, and she said, well, they had checked the phonetic spelling before with her. They had checked the pronunciation with her, but they still somehow messed it up. And so I started thinking, like, why does this happen? This should be a simple issue to solve, or at least should be an issue that is solved. And I think, like any language learning software, probably the easiest way to solve it, or at least from that perspective, is to allow someone to hear the word, the name, and repeat it kind of at their leisure and learn how to say it. And so that was the inspiration for what I'm working on now, Name Coach. I basically built a system specifically for graduations initially, which was aimed at helping them collect these voice recordings of people saying their names from students, and then giving access to deans and faculty and whoever to learn how to say them properly at graduation.
And we should probably point out that your sister's name is really not all that difficult compared with all of the millions of names on the earth. I mean, the last name is the same as yours, and we introduced you. Your name is appearing at the bottom of the screen periodically through this interview, and people can see it's Shan and Bag, and so it's not that difficult. But I think anytime you throw in an extra consonant or you stack a couple vowels together, and English speakers freak out. And I'm guessing this is probably the same across continents and other languages. Just the unfamiliarity of it. Hey, it's not my language. How do I handle this? So
exactly, yeah.
But you've created this great service. How is it going?
It's growing great. I mean, we have we have a vision that drives us, I think, and I think the vision is really that as society gets more diverse, as we're getting more more people from different places into our schools, into our businesses. This is an awesome thing. But then another question arises, which is how do we encourage inclusion? People want to feel connected in the spaces they're at, and often they just don't for various reasons. In the educational setting, there's research that points to what are called microaggressions, small slights that make someone feel like that they're an other, that they're kind of alien. And and one fundamental thing is, of course, the name. If you don't mispronounce the name of your family, people you know, people from your culture. But when you mispronounce the name of someone, when you mispronounce someone's name, it makes them feel like they don't, they're not really part of your group. They don't really quite belong in that space. And so it's kind of the fundamental aspect, the first impression of human communication. And so our vision really is to bring what we're doing to everybody across the world, into all sorts of settings where this could be useful. Important life moments like graduations or weddings, award ceremonies, things like that. But really anywhere. So right now we've just actually launched a service where we're helping schools and businesses by allowing them to embed these name recordings directly into their internal directories for seamless access now for really anyone to learn to say the name and make for a more inclusive environment, make it easier for people to connect with one another on that level.
Sure.
Yeah, and so we're really just pushing forward with that and with the graduation service.
I can see how for like a school event where big public event, lots of names coming through from the four corners of the earth, and so you can get that right. On the other hand, a company, especially a larger company, it's got a diverse employee base, and certainly they want to get those names right. So I understand that the bigger model, but you also have a small individual program that you've started up, and actually I've started using it. Can you talk a little bit about it? I believe it's called Name Badge.
Yeah, you got it, Name Badge. Yeah, so the idea here was that even while we're doing this, created this service for organizations, really anyone should enjoy being able to hear their name pronounced correctly in all aspects of their life. So anyone can go to our site and create a free name badge, which is essentially you record your name and you can add some information about the background of your name and any funny stories about it, or just stories about your name, the meaning, of course.
For example, your name. You've actually created a name badge with your name. So talk about what your name badge says.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. So I have my voice recording, as you know, my picture, and I also have the meaning of my name. So my parents, the Indian names are interesting because I think a lot of Indian names end up meaning something like son of God or brother of God, or very grandiose. So relative to those, my name is not that grandiose, but yet still grandiose. I think it's the one who excels, or master is kind of the rough translation. So I have the meaning on there. And also just funny stories. Like a lot of people from specific cultures mistake my name for a female name because it's actually very close to a female name in those cultures. And so I have stories about that on there. And and of course the background it's of Indian origin. And so I think I put this in my email signature, LinkedIn profile. I think it helps other people learn to say my name. And I think that's important to recognize, which is that I want to hear my name said correctly. Lots of people want to hear their names said correctly, but what's important to recognize is that lots of people, even more people, want to say other people's names correctly. They really, that is important to them. They want to respect your identity. They want to respect your culture. They want to connect. They don't want to alienate. But it's just difficult sometimes for whatever reason. You pointed out just unfamiliarity. So this is really a way to make it easier for others to do that.
And I think you pointed out a good example just a minute ago when you said your parents chose a name, and frequently this is what happens in lots of cultures, is that names actually get chosen because parents have a certain aspiration for their child, or a certain sense of this is where we would like this child to grow. Or certainly in some West African cultures, you're named after your first name is the day of the week you were born on. So lots of different significances, but again, if people are either mispronouncing it or unfortunately a typical American response is, oh, that's too hard, can I just call you Bud?
Yeah, that's funny you say that. My mom told me the story about how when she first moved to the country, at the doctor's office, her name is Anupama, the doctors would say, well, that's too hard, can we just call you Anna? and she told me she told me, I felt like, she said she protested, but they called her Hannah anyway. They just kind of gave up, and she told me that she'd go to the doctor and feel like they were treating someone else named Anna, not her. So I think that the story is illustrative just in general. You want to be kind of recognized for who you are, and so this is hopefully a way to to help make that happen, help make that easier.
I think whenever we move ourselves out of cultures, there are enough other indignities that we face. It seems to me that something that's our most basic identity should be able to stay in place.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think I totally agree. There's so many potential issues and actual issues out there, both in terms of our cultural backgrounds and interacting with each other. This should not be an issue, and so our goal is to make this a non-issue.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, our time is flying by, but I want to ask you quickly just one last question. What would you like, as a second-generation kid, what would you like non-immigrant Americans to know about immigrants and immigrant families?
That's interesting. So I guess one thing that I think is important to recognize is that anytime you're thinking about another group or identifying yourself as one group thinking about another, it's important to keep in mind that the other group might, people in the other group are diverse as well, even though they might represent a group such as second generation Indian Americans, or Indian American immigrants or Indian immigrants. Those people themselves are very diverse. So I experienced this firsthand as a kid. My parents had belonged to different communities within Cincinnati, very tight-knit Indian communities from different areas of India. And so, and people in those communities self-identified more with those particular communities than with Indians in general. And more generally, I have friends from India, I met in grad school or, just around Silicon Valley who identify more as Americans than Indians, and they weren't even born here, right? And so, I think it's important to recognize that people within a group just really, there's can be large differences in how they self-identify, and yeah, it's helpful to understand that.
Sure. Yeah, great answer. So, our time has absolutely flown by, but it's been a real delight talking with you. Thanks for taking the time out and speaking with our viewers today.
It's been great talking with you too, Alan. I really appreciate it, and I just want to say I believe in what you're doing as well. I think Feel Like You Belong is a great project, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Praveen. And for our viewers back home, stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment with some tips on American slang, American culture, and a little humor. What's one of the best ways to learn another language? For me, it's by listening to native speakers engage in real conversation. I've traveled to over 36 countries in my life, studied a dozen languages, and the most rewarding part has always been authentic dialogue. When I lived in Germany as a college student, I liked my classes at the university, but I got far more engaging lessons by hanging around real Germans. Living with a family, I got to listen to their daily banter around the dinner table and around the house. I can still imitate many of those conversations today. Decades after that, I moved to Brazil. I took classes at a language school and with a tutor. But spending time with my Brazilian friends at the beach gave me a chance to listen to authentic talk and ask questions. Today, I'd like to share with you a great service for intermediate and advanced students of English. It's a daily podcast called All Ears English. It's the product of teacher, traveler, and language guru Lindsay McMahon and her team of expert English teachers. Subscribing to the free podcast is done easily via iTunes, and listeners can tune in daily on their commutes to work or school. What I like most about All Ears English is that it offers natural conversation between fun-loving native speakers of American English. Their tagline is "Learn English, Love Your Life." And their philosophy is gentle and realistic. Connection, not perfection. After all, everyone makes mistakes, and if we're going to make progress, We can't get hung up by putting tiny details ahead of fluency. I know there are times when you can't be watching our TV show to improve your English, when you're jogging or bike riding or driving a car, for example. For times like those, you need a good podcast to occupy your time, but keep your eyes where you're going to stay safe. A perfect time then for All Ears English. If you try out their podcast, let me know how you like it. Your new skills might be just what you needed to help you go out and make some new English-speaking friends. I have a riddle for you. What did Geronimo yell when he jumped off the high dive? Give up? Me!